Thank you very much for coming today. I'm Walter Hang. I'm the president of Toxics Targeting. We're an environmental database firm. All we do is compile government information, and then we attribute that information to spatial locations, and we essentially map toxic sites. So recently, I was looking at the site characterization report that was done about a year ago on Elmira High. And I noticed something that probably no one else ever did. It says that this firm had provided corresponding historic plans and details depicting industrial waste facilities and operations at the former Sperry Remington site from 1967. Portions of the 1967 Lancy report were initially provided to New York State DEC in 1988. However, detailed process drawings associated with that report were not located by New York State DEC until 2013. I believe that that is a misleading statement, to say the least. And so what I'm doing today is I'm posting for public review that 1988 report provided to Unisys Corporation by Dames and Moore. Dames and Moore was one of the biggest engineering and environmental consulting firms in New York. And this report, I don't think, has ever seen the light of day. And I think it explains an enormous amount about a century worth of toxic dumping at the former Sperry Remington site. And I think that the people who are associated with that neighborhood, the people who went to school there at Elmira High School, the faculty, the student athletes, I think they're going to be stunned by what this report shows. So it says, this report describes the results of a preliminary site assessment of the Remington Rand plant site in Elmira, New York. This study is based on a review of readily available information and visual reconnaissance of the property from public areas. And it basically describes that it's, at that time, the site of Southside High School. Parts of the property have been used for industrial manufacturing since as early as 1887. The key thing is it says aerial photographs dating back to 1938 indicate disturbed areas along the eastern and southwestern portions of the site, which may have been used for disposal of waste products from plant operations. Other areas where the ground may have been affected by plant operations include drainage pipes, settling ponds, coal pits, and plating operation areas. Liquid waste may also have been discharged into a ditch leading to now Colebrook Creek east of the plant site. I believe that this is that same 1938 aerial photograph. The copy that I got in the Dames and Moore report was very, very low quality. But I believe that this is the same photograph. So this is an area where you can see disturbed earth, disturbed earth, disturbed earth. And these are areas where in decades gone by, Dames and Moore believed that there could have been disposal of toxic chemicals. Possible disposal areas and potential contaminated areas are well vegetated. They're used as public parking areas having asphalt. The areas have unrestricted access, and on the northern portion of the site, a possible former plating area forms part of the Southside High School playing fields. The more recent plating area located on the west side of the property underlies the high school building and grassed areas by the South Main Street entrance. This is surface water drainages towards Colebrook Creek. So there is an incredible compilation of the industrial waste produced at the factory. Solvent oils, sludges, solvent emulsions. These are many of the chemicals that have now been discovered in groundwater. It's just an incredible array of metals, cyanide waste. It's just incredible that this information was made available, and DEC did nothing to require the site to be cleaned up for 25 years. Here is the waste products. It actually has the dumping frequency of all of these plating areas, chromium plating. So these are classic industrial processes that in decades gone by generated highly toxic waste. Incredibly, this report actually had maps of the possible sources of contamination, possible disposal areas. They actually labeled them. You can see them with regard to the school, the athletic field, possible plating area here, more athletic fields, plating area, sludge settling pond directly underneath the school, possible disposal areas on the southern portion of the plant, former coal pile. This is where they're going to dig up a huge amount of contaminated dirt this coming summer. But there is no plan to date to clean up all of these pollution hazards. One of the biggest problems that hasn't been addressed is that there were wastewater discharges that had heavy metals and had oil. And it went off-site into a swampy area and then ultimately to Colebrook Creek. So contamination was identified in this area beginning, this is hard to believe, in 1952. And this hasn't even been fully investigated, and there are no plans to clean it up. So then they talked about the long history of the dumping, and this was one of the most truly shocking disclosures. It said, a local resident, however, recalls as a youth scavenging the dump area, quote unquote, behind the plant for explosive powders to make homemade explosives. And this is all very, very carefully referenced by Dames and Moore. And so it's again, all the way forward, this site has never been fully investigated. It's never been fully cleaned up. And in addition, they also disposed of waste at an adjoining farm area that they bought, and that also was never fully cleaned up. And then they actually found contamination when they were building the prison in that area, and that's also referenced. So on a final note, Toxics Targeting took these incredibly detailed maps of where all the buildings were and where all the industrial operations were, and we overlaid it on a current aerial photograph. So here's Miller Pond, where they said in 1995 oil showed up in the water, then they traced it back to the factory. It's about 1,000 feet away. But the truth of the matter is that the Department of Environmental Conservation had already been given this incredibly detailed report about buildings where plating operations were operated directly on top of the athletic fields. And essentially, this really should have been cleaned up many, many years ago. And that's how come we're going to be sending a letter to the governor. We're asking that all of the polluted areas associated with Sperry, Remington, be consolidated and given a Class 1 inactive hazardous waste disposal site designation, quote, causing or presenting an imminent danger of causing irreversible or irreparable damage to the public health of the environment, immediate action required. So there are already more than 500 Elmirans and people who used to live in this town that have become signatories to this letter. And the final thing is, I wanted to read one of the emails that I got from some of the people who have learned about the contamination problems at the school where they attended. And this is one of the most poignant. Hello, I'm blank. I was one of the many that got sick after attending Elmira High School, formerly known as Southside High School. I went there in the mid-90s and was diagnosed with leukemia right after I graduated. Had to postpone college for a year while on chemo. 20 years later, in 2017, was diagnosed with breast cancer. Just finished chemo and immunotherapy treatments last month. I fought 2 major cancers before the age of 40. Doctors are perplexed. Daily I think to myself, quote, what's next for me, close quote. Why it chose me over someone else? Not sure. Cancer seems to be biased in its ways, I suppose. Great article, though it's sad it's still going on, close quote. So cancer is a direct result of exposure. If you're exposed to cancer-causing agents, your risk of getting the disease goes up. And that's how come it is so imperative that this site be cleaned up without further delay. And the Department of Environmental Conservation has to explain why it never told the community about the problems that were documented at the site circa 1988, and also why it failed to require cleanup for 25 years. I just don't understand how that's even possible, but that's what happened.